I watched my son smile as the lawyer said the number 30 million, and in that moment, I understood something terrifying. I had already been erased. If you've ever given your entire life to people who later treated you like an inconvenience, stay with me. What I'm about to tell you begins with humiliation, but it does not end there. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 69 years old. And until recently, I believed that love, loyalty, and sacrifice were enough to guarantee safety in old age. I was wrong. The day my husband's will was read, I wore the pearl gray dress Arthur had bought me for our 40th anniversary. It still smelled faintly of lavender from the closet. I had chosen it carefully, not because it was expensive, but because Arthur used to say it made me look unshakable. I wanted to feel unshakable that day. I needed to. The law office sat on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown. Everything inside was polished. The wood-paneled walls, the leather chairs, the marble desk that separated us from the lawyer. It was the kind of room designed to make people feel small while decisions of enormous consequence were made. I arrived 10 minutes early, as I always did. Arthur hated lateness. Even in death, I found myself honoring his habits. My sons arrived together. Caleb, the older one, walked in first, tall, confident, already wearing the smile of a man who expected good news. He had his phone in his hand, glancing at emails as if this were just another business meeting. Behind him came Nathan, quieter, more reserved, but with the same sharp eyes. He nodded at me politely, the way one nods at a neighbor, not a mother. Their wives followed. Neither greeted me warmly. One adjusted her purse. The other whispered something that made Caleb smirk. Arthur had been gone for 9 days. 9 days since pancreatic cancer finished what months of pain had started. 9 days since I held his hand in the hospital and felt the warmth leave him. 9 days since my world collapsed, and yet, here we were, already dividing what remained. The lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, cleared his throat and began. His voice was calm, professional, and emotionally detached, as if reading grocery items instead of the outcome of a lifetime. To my son Caleb, he said, I leave full ownership of Hayes Construction Group, including all subsidiary companies and contracts. Caleb leaned back in his chair, satisfied, almost relieved. To my son Nathan, I leave Hayes Hospitality Holdings, including the restaurant chains, commercial leases, and international investments. Nathan exhaled slowly. He glanced at Caleb. A look passed between them. Victory, shared and unquestioned. Mr. Whitmore continued. Properties, counts, vehicles, safe. The numbers grew larger. So did the distance between my heartbeat and my breath. $30 million. Split evenly. Waited. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, but my fingers had gone numb. I told myself not to panic. Of course, Arthur would have taken care of me. Of course, he would not leave me unprotected after 45 years of marriage. I had stood beside him when there was nothing. I had stood beside him when there was everything. Then Mr. Whitmore paused. He shuffled papers, adjusted his glasses, looked up. And for Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, he said. My heart leapt. I straightened. I leave a personal envelope to be delivered directly to her. That was it. No explanation. No accounts. No properties. No figures. Just an envelope. Mr. Whitmore slid it across the desk toward me. It was old, yellowed, soft at the edges. The kind of envelope that looked like it had lived in a drawer for years. Caleb blinked. That's all. Nathan frowned. One of the wives laughed softly. At least it's sentimental, she said. She likes that sort of thing. Caleb chuckled. Maybe it's recipes. The room laughed. I didn't. I picked up the envelope. It weighed almost nothing. Felt like a joke. The lawyer continued explaining transfer procedures to my sons. Wire instructions, legal filings, next steps, as if I were no longer present. As if I had already served my purpose and could now quietly disappear. I sat there, holding that envelope, while my sons discussed millions as casually as the weather. Something inside me shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. Understood. No one noticed at first. Then one of the wives glanced up, surprised. "Oh, you're leaving?" He nodded. No one offered to walk me out. No one asked if I was okay. No one said thank you. I walked out of that office alone, clutching an envelope that looked like trash. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars honked. People laughed. Life continued. Mine felt finished. I walked for blocks without realizing where I was going. Every step felt heavier than the last. 45 years of marriage. 45 years of loyalty. Reduced to paper that my children mocked. When I reached my house, the silence hit me like a wall. The same house I had cleaned, decorated, repaired, and filled with warmth for decades. The same house where Arthur and I built a life brick by brick. The same house that my sons now view as a future asset. I sat at the kitchen table. The envelope lay in front of me. I didn't open it. Not yet. I stared at it, thinking of every sacrifice I had made. The nights Arthur stayed up working, I brought him coffee and stayed awake with him. The years he traveled, I raised our sons alone without complaint. The time the bank refused him a loan, I sold my mother's jewelry so he could expand the business. I never asked for recognition. I never demanded ownership. I trusted that love would protect me. How wrong I had been. Eventually night fell. The house grew colder. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands and broke the seal. Inside was a single folded page. Arthur's handwriting. Neat. Familiar. Alive. My breath caught. For the woman who always stood beside me when no one else believed. It read. Tears spilled onto the paper. Below the words was something unexpected. A bank name I did not recognize, followed by a sequence of numbers. And beneath that, one final line. This is only the beginning. My heart pounded. What beginning? Arthur had always told me everything, or so I believed. What could he have kept from me? Why would he leave me something so small, so secret, so easily dismissed? I folded the paper carefully and pressed it to my chest. Whatever this envelope contained, my husband had planned it. Carefully. Deliberately. And the men who believed they had taken everything had no idea what they had missed. That night, as I lay alone in the bed Arthur and I once shared, sleep would not come. The envelope rested on the nightstand beside me. And for the first time since my husband died, I did not feel helpless. I felt watched over. Protected. As if Arthur had reached across the silence to tell me, wait. Trust me. The truth will come. I did not yet know how cruel my son's intentions truly were. I did not yet know what they were already planning. But I would. Very soon. And when I did, the woman they thought was weak would no longer exist. The morning after the will reading, I woke with a strange sensation that something in my life had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably. Arthur's pillow was still beside me, untouched. I hadn't had the strength to move it yet. For 45 years I had woken to the sound of his breathing. His quiet cough, the rustle of him reaching for his glasses. Now there was only silence and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I sat up slowly and reached for the envelope on my nightstand. The look, even smaller in the pale morning light. The words Arthur had written replayed in my mind. This is only the beginning. Beginning of what? I made coffee the way I always had. 2 cups out of habit, then poured one down the sink when I realized what I'd done. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had stared at that envelope the night before, and unfolded the paper again. The bank name was foreign. I frowned. Arthur had traveled extensively for business over the years, but Switzerland had never been more than a passing mention. And yet there it was. Full account number. No instructions beyond that. My first instinct was to assume it was symbolic. Sentimental. Perhaps a small savings account Arthur had set aside years ago. Something modest meant to make me feel remembered without disrupting his carefully planned legacy for the boys. Still my hands shook. Picked up the phone. The bank answered in perfect English, calm and polite. When I gave my name there was no hesitation. No confusion. Yes, Mrs. Hayes, the woman said. We have been expecting your call. My stomach dropped. Expecting my call. She asked for the account number, then for verification details. Things only Arthur and I would know. Our wedding date. My maiden name. A phrase Arthur used to whisper when he wanted to make me smile. Then there was a pause. It lasted only seconds, but it felt like an hour. Mrs. Hayes, the woman said at last. The current balance of the account is $112 million. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. I'm sorry, I whispered. There must be a mistake. There is no mistake, she replied gently. The account has been active for several years. You are the sole beneficiary. 112 million. More than 3 times what my sons had inherited. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the table. I stared at the wall, my mind unable to process the number. Arthur. My Arthur. Quiet, methodical, careful Arthur. What had he done? The woman's voice returned, concerned now. Mrs. Hayes. Are you all right? I swallowed hard. Yes. Yes, I'm here. There is more, she continued. Your husband left instructions for a secure delivery. Safety deposit box. We can arrange it at your convenience. Box. More secrets. I agreed to the delivery without really understanding what I was saying. When I hung up, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. Arthur had not just left me money. He had left me answers. And my sons knew nothing. The delivery arrived the following afternoon. Plain courier, professional, discreet. He handed me a compact metal case and asked me to sign. Inside the case was a smaller box and a sealed envelope with instructions. The combination was familiar. Our anniversary. I closed the curtains, locked the door, and sat at the dining table. My heart raced as I turned the dial. When the lock clicked open, I felt a chill run through me. Inside were documents, photographs, USB drives, letters, and one envelope with my name written across it in Arthur's careful hand. I opened it slowly. My dearest Eleanor, it began. If you are reading this, then my fears were justified. My breath caught. I could not protect you openly without revealing too much. I needed our sons to believe they had one. I needed them to be comfortable, confident, careless. My hands trembled as I continued. Over the last 2 years of my life, I learned things about Caleb and Nathan that broke my heart. Things I could not share with you while I was alive, because I needed time to prepare. Prepare for what? I turned the page. Caleb has been diverting funds from the construction company to cover his gambling debts. The losses exceed $2 million. I have documented every transaction. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Gambling. My steady, disciplined firstborn. The letter continued. Nathan's problems are different, but no less dangerous. He has been laundering money through the restaurant chain to support a substance addiction. The evidence is in this box. Felt sick. I had raised these boys. Loved them. Defended them. How had I missed this? Then I read the next paragraph, and my blood ran cold. They spoke of you as if you were already gone, Arthur wrote. They discussed placing you in care, declaring you incompetent, taking what remained. I dropped the letter. My sons, planning to lock me away. I forced myself to read on, tears blurring the words. That is why I moved the majority of my assets out of reach. That is why I left you the envelope. Not because it was small, but because it was safe. My heart pounded. Arthur had been playing a long, careful game. They believe you are weak, he wrote. They are wrong. And now, my love, you have the truth. I sat there for a long time, surrounded by proof of betrayal I never wanted to see. Photographs of secret meetings, copies of bank transfers, legal documents prepared years in advance. My grief twisted into something sharper. Rage. That evening my phone rang. Caleb. Mom, he said, his voice smooth, rehearsed. We've been worried about you. You left the office so suddenly. Worried. I almost laughed. I'm fine, I replied carefully. There's something we should discuss, he continued. About the house. It's a lot for you to manage alone. Course. Already circling. I'll think about it, I said. He hesitated. Nathan and I just want what's best for you. I looked down at Arthur's letter in my lap. I'm sure you do, I replied. After I hung up, I realized something important. The envelope had not just changed my finances. It had opened my eyes. My sons were not grieving. They were moving pieces. And now so was I. I closed the safety deposit box and locked it away. For the first time since Arthur died, I slept deeply that night. Not because I was at peace, but because I finally understood the battlefield I was standing on. The truth had been hidden from me for years. Now it was mine. And the people who thought I was powerless had no idea how much power I held. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended quiet, like the air just before a storm breaks. On the surface, nothing had changed. My sons continued their lives. The businesses operated. The world kept spinning. But inside me everything was different. I was no longer a grieving widow moving blindly through shock. I was a woman who knew the truth. And once truth enters your life, it refuses to stay silent. I did not confront my sons immediately. That was Arthur's first lesson to me, written between the lines of his letter. Do not rush. Listen. Let people reveal themselves. So I did. I listened to the phone calls I had once brushed aside as busy schedules. I noticed the sudden urgency in their voices. The concern felt less like love and more like calculation. 2 days after the safety deposit box arrived, Nathan called. Mom, he said softly. I was thinking maybe it's not good for you to be alone right now. Alone. The word lingered in the air between us. I've been alone before, I replied. I managed. Yes, but this is different, he insisted. You're grieving. You're vulnerable. Vulnerable. I pictured the documents in the box. The photographs. The bank transfers. You're right, I said calmly. It is different. He seemed relieved. Good. Then you'll understand why we think you should consider some options. Options. I'll think about it, I said again, and ended the call before he could push further. That night, I went through the contents of the safety deposit box more carefully. Arthur had been meticulous. Every document was dated, cross-referenced, and labeled. There were timelines outlining suspicious behavior, audio transcripts, copies of emails, even handwritten notes in Arthur's steady script. Caleb. Pattern of cash withdrawals coinciding with casino visits. Nathan. Irregular deposits through hospitality accounts. This was not paranoia. This was proof. And then I found something that made my hands go cold. Contract. Dated 3 weeks before Arthur's death. It was an agreement with a private assisted living facility. Luxury on paper, isolated in reality. Full authority granted to Caleb and Nathan. A medical assessment is pending. My name was already printed at the top. They had planned this while their father was still alive. I sat back in my chair, breath shallow, heart pounding in my ears. Memories flooded back. Small moments I had ignored at the time. Caleb insists I stop driving at night. Nathan is suggesting I let him handle my finances. Their wives exchanged glances when I spoke. They had been preparing. And now, emboldened by the will, they were ready to move. The next morning I received a visit. Caleb arrived unannounced, carrying concern like a well-practiced performance. His wife followed, her smile tight, eyes sharp. Mom, Caleb said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We were in the neighborhood. Lie. They lived 40 minutes away. You look tired, his wife added. Are you sleeping? I sleep fine, I replied. They exchanged a look. We brought someone, Caleb said gently. The man stepped forward. Gray hair. Crisp suit. A leather folder tucked under his arm. This is Dr. Reynolds, Caleb said. He specializes in senior cognitive health. Senior. Cognitive. The trap was no longer subtle. I didn't ask for a doctor, I said. Dr. Reynolds smiled politely. This is just a conversation, Mrs. Hayes. Conversation. He nodded. Very well. Let's talk. We sat in the living room, my living room. The doctor asked simple questions at first. A date, the year, who the president was. I answered calmly. Then came the real questions. Do you remember the details of your husband's will? Yes, I said. Perfectly. And how do you feel about what you received? I looked directly at Caleb. I feel informed. The doctor hesitated, pen hovering. Informed how? I smiled slightly. Enough. Caleb shifted in his seat. The doctor closed his folder. Mrs. Hayes, I believe further evaluation may be beneficial. I disagree, I replied. Caleb leaned forward. Mom, this isn't about disagreement. It's about safety. There it is, I said quietly. His wife frowned. What? The word you've been waiting to use. Silence filled the room. Understood. This meeting is over, I said. Please leave. Caleb's expression hardened. You're not thinking clearly. I walked to the hallway table and picked up a photograph from Arthur's box. It showed Caleb outside a casino at 3 a.m, flanked by men I did not recognize. I held it up. You want to talk about clarity? Yes. The color drained from his face. Nathan burst through the door moments later, breathless. What's going on? He asked. I turned to him and placed a second document on the table. Bank transfers, highlighted. He didn't have to read them. He already knew. The room filled with something heavy and unspoken. You plan to lock me away, I said evenly. While stealing from your father. While destroying everything he built. Caleb stammered. Mom, you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I replied. I understand now why your father was so careful. Dr. Reynolds stood abruptly. I believe I should leave. Sit, I said sharply. He froze. You are not a doctor, I continued. You're a signature for hire. His shoulders slumped. Caleb's wife began to cry. Not from guilt but fear. This was for your own good, she said. You're old. You don't see things clearly anymore. Well, the word no longer hurts. Sharpen me. I see more clearly now than I ever have, I said. I took out my phone and pressed record. I am Eleanor Hayes, I said calmly. And I am being pressured in my own home by my children and a hired accomplice to surrender my independence. Caleb lunged toward me. Stop recording. Touch me, I said quietly. And this ends very differently for you. He stopped. The man claiming to be Dr. Reynolds confessed within minutes. Caleb's wife sobbed openly. Nathan stared at the floor. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not triumph, but certainty. The woman they had dismissed as fragile was gone. In her place stood someone they no longer recognized. Get out, I said. They left without another word. That night I sat alone again, but this time the silence felt different. I wasn't afraid anymore. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was exposed. And now that I had seen it clearly, there was only one thing left to decide. What to do with the truth. The morning after they left my house, I woke before dawn with a clarity I had never known. Not fear. Not grief. Clarity. For the first time since Arthur's death, I understood exactly where I stood, and more importantly, where they stood. My sons believed power came from money, from ownership, from signatures on paper they barely understood. They believed I was something to be managed, contained, redirected. Loose end. Arthur had known better. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread out in front of me. Not in a panic. Not in confusion. But with the calm focus of a woman who had spent 4 decades absorbing knowledge quietly, patiently, without ever being credited for it. For 45 years, I had listened while Arthur talked business over dinner. I had read contracts when his eyes were tired. I had asked questions he dismissed at first, then answered carefully once he realized I understood more than he expected. I had never been powerless. I had simply never chosen to use my power. The phone rang at 8:30. Caleb. I let it ring. At 8:35, Nathan called. I let it ring too. At 9 o'clock my doorbell rang. I didn't answer. I already knew what they wanted. They were scared. By noon my attorney arrived. George Whitman was not the family lawyer. Arthur had chosen him carefully. Quiet, precise, independent. A man who didn't flinch when faced with uncomfortable truths. "Mrs. Hayes," he said after reviewing everything, "your husband anticipated this exactly." He opened a folder thicker than any I had seen before. "Legally," he continued, "you control 51% of the holding company that owns every subsidiary your sons believe they inherited." I looked at him steadily. "So they don't own the businesses?" "They manage them," George replied. "Until you decide otherwise." The words settled into me like armor. "They thought the will was everything," I said softly. George nodded. That was the point. The following day I called a meeting. Not at my house. Not at the law office. At the main corporate headquarters. Caleb and Nathan arrived early, tense, pale, dressed for battle. Their wives did not come. They expected confrontation. What they got was procedure. I entered the boardroom calmly and took the seat at the head of the table. They froze. "You're in my chair," Caleb said reflexively. I looked at him. "No. You've been in mine for years." George distributed folders. Audits. Transfer of authority. Temporary suspensions. Conditions. Nathan's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "It is," I replied. "And it's legal." Caleb stood. "You can't do this." "I already have," I said. Their voices rose. Accusations followed. Anger. I let them talk. Then I spoke. "For decades," I said, "I watched you mistake access for entitlement. You believed inheritance was a reward, not a responsibility." They stared at me as if I were a stranger. "You stole," I continued evenly. "You lied. You planned to imprison me. And you did all of it while calling yourselves businessmen." Nathan dropped his head. Caleb clenched his fists. "Here is what will happen," I said. "Caleb, you will step down as CEO effective immediately. You will remain employed, under supervision, at an entry-level position until every dollar you stole is repaid." His mouth fell open. "You're humiliating me." "No," I replied. "I am educating you." I turned to Nathan. "You will enter treatment," I said. "Immediately. Your cooperation with authorities will determine whether you retain any future role in the company." He whispered, "You're destroying us." I shook my head. "I am saving what your father built. And I am saving myself." They had no leverage. Every threat they tried to make collapsed under the weight of the documentation Arthur had prepared years earlier. By the end of the meeting they signed. Not because they wanted to. 'Cause they had no choice. That afternoon I walked through the offices alone. Employees looked at me with curiosity. Some with respect. Some with fear. I gathered them in the conference room. "I know there have been rumors," I said. "I know there has been instability." Murmurs rippled through the room. "I am not here to punish," I continued. "I am here to restore integrity." Silence followed. Those who worked honestly have nothing to fear. Those who didn't will answer for it. Applause started quietly, then grew. That night my house felt different. Not empty. The next weeks were relentless. Audits uncovered more than Arthur had documented. Fraud. Mismanagement. Abuse of trust. I acted decisively. Not cruelly. Not emotionally. Decisively. Caleb showed up at my door one evening. Exhausted, hands rough, ego shattered. "I never thought you'd do this," he said. "I never thought you'd force me to," I replied. Nathan called from treatment weeks later. "I'm scared," he admitted. "So was I said. "The difference is, I didn't steal to avoid it." Slowly, painfully power shifted. Not with shouting. Not with revenge. With consequences. One evening, months later, I sat alone again at the kitchen table. The envelope rested beside me. Not as an insult. As a reminder. Arthur hadn't left me money. He had left me authority. And I had finally claimed it. But the story was not over. Because power is not an ending. It is a beginning. And what I chose to do with it would matter far more than how I had taken it back. The first morning I woke without dread was the moment I understood that power, once reclaimed, does not shout. Settles. Months had passed since the boardroom meeting. Since the signatures. Since the fear left my bones. The world had not ended. It had adjusted. Quietly, steadily, like water finding a new shape. I sat at the kitchen table with the windows open. Sunlight pooling on the floor where shadows used to live. The house felt lighter now. Not because Arthur was gone, but because I was finally present in it as myself, not as someone waiting to be managed. For the first time in decades, my days belonged to me. The businesses stabilized quickly, faster than anyone expected. When fear is removed, honesty follows. Employees began speaking openly, about mistakes, about pressure, about corners they had been forced to cut. I listened, not as a distant owner, but as a woman who understood what it meant to carry responsibility without recognition. I made changes, not dramatic ones, thoughtful ones, transparent accounting, independent oversight, clear ethics policies that did not bend for family names. Wages were corrected, benefits restored, long overdue promotions given to people who had earned them years ago. I walked job sites, kitchens, offices. First people stared. Then they relaxed. Then they talked. They told me stories about Arthur, about the early days, about how they had always wondered why I was never officially involved when it was clear I understood everything. Smiled. I was involved, I told them. Just not on paper. Caleb kept his head down. He worked. Physically. Honestly. There was no special treatment, no shortcuts. Some days he resented me. Other days, he thanked me without saying the words. Humility is not gentle when it arrives late in life. Nathan stayed in treatment longer than required. He wrote letters instead of calling. Apologies without excuses. Admissions without defenses. He was changing, not perfectly, not quickly, but genuinely. I did not rush forgiveness. Forgiveness, I learned, is not something you give to relieve discomfort. It is something that grows when accountability takes root. But the greatest change was not in them. 'Twas in me. For 45 years, I had been invisible by design. I had been the quiet support, the reliable presence, the woman behind the curtain who made everything possible without ever standing in the light. I had confused humility with erasure, love with disappearance. That version of me did not survive Arthur's death, nor should she have. One afternoon, I received a letter from a woman I did not know. She was 72. Her children had placed her in assisted living against her will after convincing a doctor she was confused. They sold her house, took her savings. She had no legal help, no advocate, no one would listen. Her story was different, and the same. Called George that same day. I want to do something, I told him. Something that lasts. We built it carefully, deliberately. Foundation. Not a vanity project. Not a charity designed to polish reputations. A practical, legal, relentless support system for older women facing financial abuse, coercion, and invisibility. Legal representation. Financial education. Emergency housing. Advocacy. Women who had been dismissed, silenced, controlled. Women like me had almost been. The first woman we helped was named Ruth. She was 68. Her son had convinced her to sign documents she didn't understand. She thought she was helping him with a loan. She lost everything. When we won her case, she cried. Not because of the money, but because someone had finally said, "You matter." That moment changed me more than the millions ever could. Word spread. Stories poured in. Daughters who had stolen pensions. Sons who controlled bank accounts. Families who used concern as a weapon. Doctors are paid to sign forms. Lawyers who looked away. We did not look away. We stood where no one had stood before. And something unexpected happened. Women began standing taller. They began speaking louder. They began recognizing themselves again. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I stood in front of the mirror and truly looked at myself. The wrinkles were still there. The gray hair. Years. But so was something else. Presence. I was no longer someone waiting to be valued. I was someone who knew her value. Caleb came for dinner one Sunday. He arrived early. He helped without being asked. He listened more than he spoke. "I never saw you," he admitted quietly, staring at his plate. "Not really." "I know," I replied. "That's why this had to happen." Nathan joined us months later, thinner, steadier, clearer-eyed. He spoke honestly about his recovery, about shame, about fear. "I didn't think you were strong," he said. "I thought you were comfortable." I smiled sadly. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Time passed. The foundation grew. The businesses thrived under leadership rooted in accountability rather than entitlement. And my life, my actual life, finally began. I traveled. Not for obligation. For curiosity. I read books I had postponed. Took classes I had once dismissed as impractical. Surrounded myself with people who did not need me to be small to feel large. On the anniversary of Arthur's death, I visited the cemetery alone. I brought flowers. I brought silence. "I understand now," I said softly. "What you trusted me to become." The envelope sat in my bag. Still dusty. Still simple. Still everything. That envelope had never been about money. It had been permission. Permission to step forward. Permission to take up space. Permission to stop apologizing for my existence. If there is one truth I want to leave behind, one lesson worth carrying, it is this. Invisibility is not a flaw of age. It is something the world teaches us to accept. And strength does not fade with time. It waits for recognition. To every woman listening who has been told she is too old, too quiet, too much trouble, I see you. If you have ever felt erased by the very people you gave everything to, know this. Your story is not over. Your power is not gone. And it is never too late to become visible. To yourself first and then to the world. I was 70 years old when my life truly began. And I am not finished yet.